It was a dark and shadowy night, outside the city in the hills. Agent Arbel looked anxiously through the car's windows as his driver inched them up the winding roads to the site. The bundle, next to him in the car, moved and shifted softly. Agent Arbel was the head of an anti-terrorist border security agency. At his rank, that meant mostly paperwork, but tonight he was on a secret mission. He and his drivers passed through checkpoints, attracting little or no attention from the soldiers. Only a year before, this area had been torn apart by war, and even now the threat of violence hung over their heads. Their destination was a shrine, an old one. How old, no one could say for sure, at least 3,000 years, give or take. Like many such places in that part of the world, who got to use it and visit it and pray there was a matter of some dispute. In fact, after the war, a gunman had shot 40 worshippers who had come to the shrine. Agent Arbel believed that if they could create a separate entrance, one that went in underneath and opened into a rumored underground chamber, they could solve the problem of warring religions worshipping on the same grounds. In the middle of the night, when they got to the old building, Agent Arbel went to speak with his contacts, men who could get them into the grounds without alerting those who would like to keep them out. After a brief conversation, Agent Arbel asked his driver to go back and bring the bundle. So he did. And when he set the bundle down, on its feet, as it turned out, one of the men gaped at the agent, saying incredulously, "Are you out of your ever-loving mind?" The man next to him said, "You cannot be serious." Because the bundle was a human being, a 13-year-old girl. She shook her head to clear the sleepiness and yawned. No, it's okay. I can do it. I got to tell you about this girl. Her name was Michal Arbel, the agent's daughter. Several things that she cared about. One was God. She began to lead the family prayers at sundown on Friday when she was 8 years old. Her first love was a scholar who had lived 1,000 years before. She loved to study ancient writings and eventually would grow up to become a literature professor. But as a kid, she loved to hike and explore and even sometimes go caving. At the time of this story, she was a freshly minted teenager, just turned 13. In telling about the incident later, her father frequently forgot that she had just had a birthday and told folks she was 12 years old at the time. So when you read about the story, you might find that number. But she had had her 13th birthday. She had agreed to come with him on this mission. She and her mother had spent the day learning how to take measurements on buildings, almost like a student of architecture or something. Mom asked Michal if she could handle doing the same sort of thing underground in the middle of the night. And the girl said yes. Then her mother told her exactly the location where she was going, and Michal's eyes got very wide, but if anything, she got more excited. Her father woke her enough to bundle her in blankets, hustled her into the car, and together they drove off at night because they were not supposed to be there. The city where they were going was an ancient one, Hebron, taken by Israel in our time during the 6-Day War. The shrine where they were going had been held by Muslims for about 700 years, and Jews were still only allowed to get only so close to the entryway. But they knew there was an opening, a small opening leading to some kind of ancient underground chamber where Agent Arbel hoped to create an entryway so that he and his people could come there to pray. And if the other folks there didn't see them, perhaps they could avoid violence. This hole into the underground chamber was only 11 inches wide. That was why Agent Arbel brought his daughter. No grown-up could fit down there. And Michal, well, she was small for her age, and she should have no trouble. They tied a rope around her waist, gave her a flashlight and some matches, and watched as she wriggled down through the hole. I've got to tell you, the matches were not for light. Sometimes in ancient chambers, burial chambers, the air is not safe to breathe. You can suffocate or pass out or get sick, depending on what you find there. To Michal's great relief, the match lit just fine, and she was able to get the air she needed. Oh, it smelled musty and old, but the dead things down there had been dead for so long they didn't smell like anything other than wet dust. You should know, there was a legend at the time that anyone who went down through that hole would die. But Michal wasn't afraid of it. This place had entered history as a tomb, and indeed, right in front of Michal were 3 sarcophagi, old stone coffins. An inscription on the middle one. She carefully copied it onto her notepad. Then she took out her equipment and began to make measurements, passing back and forth in a very narrow but long, cramped space. She found that she could stand up in some spots, but there was no way her father could ever have made it down there and gone all over to make those measurements. She also found ancient scraps of paper and other artifacts that had somehow found their way inside over the centuries. After several hours of work, she tugged on the rope to come back up. Not too many days after, her father met with the Minister of Defense. Agent Arbel showed his boss Michal's carefully drawn measurements and diagrams of the underground tomb. The minister, when he realized what he was looking at, said sharply to Agent Arbel, "How did you get this?" When Agent Arbel told him, the minister said, "That was very dangerous for you both, but I would like to meet your daughter." Michal was almost nonchalant as the defense minister interviewed her about what she'd seen. Wasn't she afraid of ghosts? She didn't believe in ghosts, and I bet she knew what the scriptures said about what happens when a person dies. What about snakes and spiders? Those are very real, and they are very present in old places like that. But Michal said she wasn't worried. She had a flashlight. And of course, whether they talked about it in that conversation or not, I think the Almighty was with her. Why do I tell you this story? Well, a big reason is that this story, which happened in 1968, connects our world with the world of the Bible. I didn't tell you yet, but the cave tomb that Michal entered, which is known today as the Cave of the Patriarchs, was first mentioned in Genesis chapter 23. In the story, Abraham has to make arrangements to bury his wife Sarah, who has just passed away. And the Bible tells us that he arranged to buy from a local Hittite man the cave of Machpelah. And that's where the shrine was built. Is the spot really the cave where Abraham buried Sarah and where he was buried later, other members of the family? Well, the archaeological evidence is that people have been going to that spot on a pilgrimage since at least the 8th century BC, which is a very long time ago. Abraham lived and died long before that, but if you put the information from the Bible with the locations and the descriptions that we have, I think it's likely that that tradition is correct. And it's held by Jews and Christians and Muslims. They all believe that this is the same place that Abraham bought as a tomb. Applying it to our lives, well, you're never too young to do hard things. Looking back on what she did, many people have criticized Michal's father for putting her in that situation. It was dangerous for several reasons. But this girl rose to the occasion, and in so doing, she became the first Jew in that shrine for 700 years, and the first person down in that hole for the same amount of time. Never sell yourself short just because you're a kid. In the New Testament, 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12 says, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young, but set an example for other believers." Just as Michal became an inspiration to archaeologists, religious pilgrims, lovers of the Bible, and patriots of her nation, you can be an inspiration and encouragement for your family, your classmates, your church family as well. That's your invitation today. Thanks for listening.